So, for the last couple of years, right, all we've heard about is the global chip shortage. But what if I told you the headlines totally missed the real story? That the crisis wasn't just about factory capacity, but about something way, way more fundamental. Okay, let's get into it. You see, the real bottleneck, the thing that the entire trillion-dollar semiconductor industry is built on, it's not just about supply chains. It's about a raw material so incredibly difficult to make that only a tiny handful of companies in the world have ever truly mastered it. Yeah, the problem goes so much deeper than just building more factories. We're talking about a fight happening at the atomic level, a battle to get rid of contaminants that are measured in parts per trillion. This is a war for absolute insane purity. And this stuff, electronic-grade polysilicon, this is the starting block for pretty much every advanced chip on the planet. And one company, Xinhua Semiconductor, has put itself right in the middle of this incredibly high-stakes game. So to really get why Xinhua's IPO is such a big deal, you first have to understand this purity crisis and the massive global choke point this material really is. Okay, so for decades, the world of ultra-pure silicone was basically an exclusive club. You had this tiny oligopoly, a few companies in Germany, the US, and Japan, and they controlled everything. Now, this wasn't just a business advantage, right? It was a huge strategic vulnerability for any country trying to build its own chip industry, and that's exactly why Xinhuai was created, to break that monopoly. So what makes this stuff so special? Well, it all comes down to some pretty mind-blowing science. The science of 11 nines. To put it simply, this is the foundation of our entire digital world. It's the silicone that gets sliced into wafers that become the chips in your phone, your car, and in those giant data centers powering all the AI. But calling it pure doesn't even come close. This is the number that changes everything. 11 nines. To give you some perspective, if you had a kilometer-long rod of this silicon, all of the impurities combined would be smaller than a single human blood cell. I mean, that's not a goal, that is the minimum requirement. Just look at the difference here. The silicone in solar panels at 98% pure sounds pretty good, right? Well, for a high-end chip, that's basically just contaminated dirt. For the chips that run AI, for high-end GPUs, for the power modules in your EV, anything less than 11 nines purity, and that chip is just a worthless piece of sand. It literally will not work, period. And achieving this kind of purity, well, it's not a simple filtering job. It's this super complex, energy-hungry process called the improved Siemens method. Think of it like a closed-loop system, where gases are refined and redeposited again and again and again, with all the byproducts getting constantly recycled. And this shows how Xinhua hasn't just mastered the chemistry, they've engineered it to work at a massive industrial scale. So let's be crystal clear, this isn't just some ingredient, it's the bedrock. Without this level of purity, the entire foundation for AI, 5G, and high-performance computing just crumbles. It is the absolute non-negotiable starting point for everything. All right, let's switch gears and talk business. Let's look at how this incredible tech mastery turns into a really powerful strategic monopoly, something investors should definitely be paying attention to. Inside China, Xinhua isn't just another company. They are the dominant force. As of 2024, they command over half of the entire domestic market for this critical material. They've effectively become the gatekeeper for the country's entire chip industry. But you know, it gets even more interesting when you dig a little deeper and see where the market is actually going. See, 12-inch wafers are the standard for all the advanced chip making. They make up over 75% of all silicon wafer area produced in the world. This is where the real action is. This is the big leagues. And here's the knockout punch for you. In that supercritical, high-value 12-inch market, Xinhua isn't just the leader. They are the only large-scale domestic supplier in China. Think about that. They have a total monopoly on the most important piece of the foundational material for the country's entire semiconductor ambition. And we're not talking about a low-quality substitute here. Just look at the hard data. This table compares key impurity types that can wreck a chip's performance, things called donor and acceptor atoms. For donor impurities, lower is better, and you can see Xinhua's material is actually cleaner than some of its legendary global rivals. So they haven't just caught up. In some really critical areas, they've actually blown past the global standard. This dominance is protected by what you might call a fortress of a business model. First, they've got the financial backing of the state's massive Big Fund. Second, the barriers to entry are huge. Switching to a new supplier is incredibly risky for a chipmaker and can take up to 3 years of validation. It's no wonder their client list, which is basically a who's who of major Chinese silicon wafer makers, is totally locked in.
So, with all that in mind, what's the final verdict on this IPO? What's the big takeaway for investors and for anyone watching the tech space?
Well, the analyst consensus seems pretty clear. This IPO isn't just about raising money, it's a major statement. Xinhua is signaling a huge shift in their strategy. The era of just being a domestic replacement is over. Now they're using their massive economies of scale to compete on the world stage.
And that leaves us with one last, really fascinating question. For decades, the world's silicon backbone was built and maintained by just a handful of Western and Japanese companies. With this IPO, is Xinhuai making a play to not just join that exclusive club, but to maybe rebuild that backbone entirely on its own terms? And that is what makes this one of the most important IPOs to watch.